To achieve the 40mm thick window buff, I'm using 2 layers of 20mm thick pine glued on top of each other. When I'm satisfied it's in the correct position, I add 8-gauge countersunk screws. I then work my way around the sides and top of the frame, adding the other pieces.
You come and go like a monsoon rain. You hide and show like a lightning bolt. You have it all.
In this video series, I take you through the process of how we created this backyard art studio. It features 3 large windows and glass doors to allow natural light to fill the interior. It also includes an outdoor covered awning space with a hardwood batten privacy screen. We chose to use passive house design systems in the construction to make the most of the year-round weather conditions. In the last episode, we added door and window openings. This involved removing temporary studs from our walls and adding lintels to support the roof weight. I then completed the roof frame by adding the final piece of our pre-painted timber to install the fascia that completes the front of the overhang awning of our roof. I also added strips of fly screen to the bottom of our wall to stop insects penetrating the air gap, which is part of our passive house system. I was then able to add the orientated strand board sheeting, which adds shear strength to our walls. This is the first element of 4 elements that'll make up the passive house design system that'll keep our structure warm in winter and cool in summer. I then seal the bottom of the OSB walls with Sikaflex to stop any water penetrating the wall system. I was then able to add the breathable membrane. This will keep moisture out of our walls, but allow it to breathe and let moisture exit the system to avoid problems with mold and mildew. In this episode, we'll be adding the foil board exterior insulation to our walls and completing the details of the door and window frames, including the flashing elements to help keep them waterproof. I'll also be installing the timber-treated battens, which is part of the passive house design system that creates an air gap between the outside skin of the wall and the inside insulation. The next step in our project is to create a window buff for all the door and window openings. A window buff is an extension of the door and window frames. This is necessary for the air cavity rain screen we're installing on the walls. It allows the outside plane of the window to align with the cement sheet we'll be adding later as the final cladding layer of the wall. It also creates an anchor point for the waterproof flashing we need to make the windows watertight. The depth or thickness of the window buff is determined by the elements we're using to create the cavity rain screen, which will establish the thickness of the wall. Because we're using 25mm foil board insulation and 27mm treated pine battens, the window buff will need to be 40mm thick for the windows and 20mm thick for the doors. The windows and doors come from different manufacturers, and the flange on the exterior of the aluminium frame of the doors and windows is a different design, so that's why we have different buffs for the doors and windows. I've created a jig out of the same material we'll be using for the window buff frame. This way I can accurately scribe pencil marks on the wall, which will assist me in the measurement and installation of the material later.
But there's some words that I just wanna hear you say, to put it all straight before this night turns into day, and then I'm on my way. Yeah. Yes, I'm on my way.
To achieve the 40mm thick window buff, I'm using 2 layers of 20mm thick pine glued on top of each other. To create an accurate fit for the frame, I start with temporarily installing the bottom piece, cut slightly oversized. By resting the vertical pieces on this first horizontal piece, I'm able to make accurate cut marks. I then cut and double check all the pieces for fit. Once I've cut all my pieces, I label them for assembly later. I start the assembly by putting the bottom horizontal piece in place securing it with my clamps and adjusting it with my rubber hammer. When I'm satisfied it's in the correct position, I add 8-gauge countersunk screws to fix it in place. I then work my way around the sides and top of the frame, adding the other pieces. I'm using a combination of screws and liquid nails glue. When I was installing the wall membrane, I left a 50mm strip of OSB exposed around the edge of the window, specifically to give us a surface for the glue to join these frames to our wall. When the first layer of 20mm frame is installed, I add the second 20mm frame on top using glue and screws.
A bit naive and so eager to please. You know I played for love, but it got me on my knees. Now's the time to reap what I've sown. Your words echoing in every single bone. Underwater, so far out at sea, there's no cure for what you're telling me, and soon I'm on my way. Yes, I'm on my way.
The next day we move our attention round to the other side of the building to build the third window buff. The third window is made by the same manufacturers as the first two windows on the front, so we'll be using the same system to create the extended window frame. One of the reasons I wanted to wait to have my windows on site before creating my window and door openings is because of this process. It would be logistically difficult and time expensive to adjust the size of these window openings. So by waiting to have the actual windows here to measure against, I'm confident in not having to make any adjustments to the opening size. With the 3 windows complete, I start the frame extension on the 2 doorways we have. Like I mentioned earlier, the doors and windows come from different manufacturers, so the frame extension on the door is only 20mm instead of the 40mm we did on the windows. I'll only be installing 1 layer of the 20mm thick pine framing. I'll be using liquid nails glue and screws like I did with the windows. One of the reasons why I use a bead of liquid nails is to help eliminate any micro drafts or air gaps that can penetrate our building.
Now everything that has been don't matter no more. We've burned it. All those whirlwinds can't touch us no more. We've earned it. Everything that has been don't matter no more. We've burned it. All those whirlwinds can't touch us no more. We've earned it.
With all the timber elements complete for the window and door buffs, I move on to installing the waterproof flashing elements. The first step will be to add silver tape to the sides of our window extension. This will stop any moisture in the rain screen cavity from penetrating the window frame. This silver tape is not always easy to apply due to how sticky it is. Once the paper backing is removed, it has a tendency to stick to itself, so you need to have a strategy in mind when applying it. When I'm installing this kind of tape to an inside corner, I work in small pieces about 300mm long so it's manageable. The silver tape flashing comes in different widths. Here I'm using 50mm wide tape, as it's just wide enough to create a small overlap on our membrane and the front of our window buff. By working with small manageable pieces, I carefully stick the edge of the tape to the front of the window buff and then roll it onto the side of the frame, ensuring I have a slight overlap on our membrane. When the flashing process is complete, we don't want any gaps in our materials, so we create slight overlaps between one edge of the tape and the next. This will ensure no moisture can penetrate the wood in our frame. Once I complete the bottom section of this frame, I move on to the sides and continue to work my way around until the whole frame's covered with silver tape on its edge.
Come closer, dance for me. Easy, tiger, easy, let your hair down. Come closer, let me see closer so that we can be together.
The next step in our window flashing process is to add tape to the front and inside edges of the window buff frame extension. This creates a waterproof gasket between the timber elements of our wall and the aluminium window frames. To apply this purpose-made stretchable window flashing, I take measurements of the window frame and pre-cut pieces so it's easier to manage while sticking it onto the frame. These flashing tapes come with a waxed paper backing. This helps me keep control of where the tape sticks. Once this tape sticks to a surface, it's very difficult to reposition it. So my process for getting the tape to stick in the correct position the first time is to peel a small piece of the backing to expose a little bit of the sticky part of the tape and get it started on the edge of the window frame. I can then remove more of the wax paper backing as I stick the tape down, working left to right in small sections. When the front edge of the bottom of the window frame buff is covered, I move on to the inside corner. Adding this extremely sticky tape to an inside corner can be tricky, so I use a system of folding the tape in half, then removing the backing from only half the tape. I then use a paint scraper to help position the tape into the inside corner. Once half the tape's stuck in place, I can remove the backing from the other half and stick the tape to the rest of the inside corner. This inside bottom corner of the window frame is the most likely place for rot to occur if the flashing isn't installed properly. This purpose-made stretchable flashing tape was designed to help solve the problem of this inside corner. It allows you to stick the tape to the inside of the frame and then stretch it to the outside of the frame. This creates a waterproof seal in this difficult corner area. When I've completed the flashing for the bottom corners, I continue to install the flashing tape around the rest of the frame. One of the important parts of installing any flashing is to use the shingle principle, and shingling means you always have the higher layer overlapping the bottom layer. This helps stop water infiltrating the overlaps of the tape.
Everything that has been don't matter no more. We've burned it. All those whirlwinds can't touch us no more. We've earned it. We've earned it. We've been mostly off track and under attack, so we've earned it. Yeah, we've stayed loyal to each other.
With the flashing elements complete on these two window buffs, the last step in the process is to add a piece of membrane on the top of the wall above the windows. I left this piece of membrane out when we covered the walls earlier, as it's more practical to put it on now. This is part of the shingling process of applying the top piece on last to keep the materials overlapping so the water can flow over the top of them. After this final piece of membrane is stapled in place, these frames are ready for window installation.
Of all the magic places in the world I've been to, this is where my heart is. Oh, you know it's true. No matter where I go, I'm coming home to you. Been walking down the street so many times, my feet know every brick and stone. Could wear a blindfold. No matter what I do, I'm coming home to you.
With the flashing complete on these two windows, I move my way around the building, flashing out the rest of the openings. I'm using a similar process to flash the door frame out, with the main difference being there's no sill on the bottom like the windows. The doors we're installing come with their own threshold built in, which looks after the water being channeled out of the bottom of the door frame.
And I don't know why, don't know why, don't know why I'm always feeling homesick. Oh, all I know, all I know, all I know is this is where my heart is. Oh,
finishing off the top of this window slightly differently than the others, as there's no eave on this side of our building. I've added a bead of Sikaflex to help stop any water or moisture penetrating through the inside top corner of this window frame. Here you can see how I've created an overlap in the membrane so it can channel water out of our rain cavity and into the front face of the window when it's installed. With the window and door buffs complete, I move on to installing the foil board, which will be the insulation of our building. I'll be installing it over the breathable membrane to create an almost unbroken blanket of insulation around the walls and roof. I'll be using two different thicknesses of foil board, 25mm thick for the roof and 15mm for the walls. The foil board product comes in a standard sheeting size of 2.4 by 1.2 meters. This will enable me to have the seams of the foil board laid directly on the studs of our frame, which later on will be covered with our battens. After doing a cutout for the pet door, I can go through the process of attaching this first sheet to our wall. To avoid any unnecessary perforations in our insulation, I'm using a system of taping the edges to the membrane and then stapling the tape in place. By applying foil tape along the joins of the foil board, I'll be able to ensure an air and watertight seal between each sheet. It also gives me a way of stapling the foil board to the OSB under the membrane. I then use small pieces of foil tape to cover all the staple holes to ensure no moisture can leak into the walls. I then continue the process around the sides of the foil board, and in this case that involves sealing around the pet door.
Tonight we'll turn minutes into days, and nothing's gonna make me look away. Peel off a layer and breathe, lift up your head and lead, count the stars up before you leave. Save a kiss, pretty please, try to reminisce over me, know that I will cherish your memory.
Another reason why I'm applying tape to all the edges of the foil board is that the polystyrene in the foil board will shrink a little bit over time. This creates small gaps between the sheets, which will compromise the insulation membrane. So by adding foil tape on the edges, it'll help mitigate the small gaps that are created later as it ages.
Peel off a layer and breathe, lift up your head and lead, count the stars up before you leave. Save a kiss, pretty please, try to reminisce over me, know that I will cherish your memory.
One of the important passive house design elements we're using in our studio is to install insulation over the outside of our frame to help create an unbroken thermal barrier. The more common way of insulating walls by adding the insulation between the timber studs on the inside of the wall has a couple of disadvantages. The timber framing in the walls that the insulation is laid in between becomes the weak point in the thermal barrier, resulting in heat being allowed to leak through the timber elements of the wall. So by installing solid insulation sheets on the outside frame of the wall, it creates a more consistent and efficient thermal barrier, which is why this system is used more often in modern homes these days. I'm fitting the last pieces in this wall extra tight to help account for the shrinkage in the material later on. By cutting the foam board about 3 to 5 mil larger than the gap, I can get a tight fit without snapping or damaging the foam board. Another important aspect of installing the foam board is to make sure I get a tight fit around the window buffs.
Cutting grass and chopping wood can be romantic. Sipping coffee under the apple tree is gentlemanly. Well, you're good man, quite the best man, a real fine man. When the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. And there's no use in looking back, going back, wishing back.
Because the foil board has a membrane of aluminium foil on both sides of it, I prefer using a wood saw to make an accurate and controlled cut, especially when creating a long, thin piece like this one to fill out the top of the wall. Because this piece is wedge-shaped to account for the rake in our roof, I'm cutting it in 2 stages. After checking that the angle is correct in this small triangular piece, I scribe the end off it, then trim it and return it in place. This way I can get the tight fit we're trying to achieve to help avoid any gaps that'll happen later when it slightly shrinks. I then complete the process by adding foil tape along the seam. Here I'm using multiple pieces of foil tape, as it can be difficult to manage due to its extreme stickiness. After rubbing the foil smooth along the seam, I take measurements for the final piece to complete this wall, then transfer the numbers to the sheet of foil board in preparation for cutting it out. I'm using an offcut of OSB that matches the angle of our roof rake as a template. By aligning the square side of the template to the square edge of the foil board, I can accurately transfer the angle of the roof to our material. When I'm satisfied the template's sitting completely parallel to the foil board, I mark it out with a pen and then cut it with my timber saw.
You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh, when the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. And there's no use in looking back, going back, wishing back. You master how to simplify. You turn rain into a blue sky. Oh, when the wind blows and the windows are closing, you let the world know that what has been has been. And there's no use in looking back, going back, wishing back.
As I complete the insulation for the final wall of the studio, I continue to use a layout pattern of covering the bottom half of the wall first and then working my way up to the top of the wall. Once I'm satisfied the piece is fitting properly, I secure it in place by taping the 4 corners with small pieces of silver tape. One of the advantages of this particular product is it has 100mm grid lines laid out on it, which makes it easy to transfer measurements from the wall to the material and make an accurate straight cut. After installing all the pieces for the next layer of foil board along the wall, we come to the top section of the wall, which is going to require a different approach than the other walls we've done. I'm installing a piece of timber quad along the top of the wall. It's 15mm thick, which is the same as the foil board thickness. This will help create a strong and secure foundation for the materials we'll be adding later. To fix it in place, I'm using 40mm long galvanized bullet head nails. I use a scrap piece of timber to keep it in line with the roof plane and add a nail every 300mm.
Hey darling, you know we're gonna have a really good time, driving in the middle of the night when the stars are bright. Pack our bags and get in that car, leave a little note and we'll drive real far. so pretty with the wind blowing in your hair.
Another advantage of installing insulation on the outside of your frame like this is it pushes the condensation point to the outside of our membrane. This helps to keep the inside wall cavity dry and help avoid moisture and mold issues in the life of the building. The battens we'll be adding over the top of the foil board will create an air cavity for moisture to collect and drain out from the bottom of the wall. This is all part of the passive house design techniques that help keep the structure dry, warm, and energy efficient. The next step in the construction of our walls is to add timber battens over the foil board insulation. The 25mm thick battens create an air gap between the insulation and the outside cladding of the wall, which in our case will be cement sheet. The battens are laid in alignment with the studs of the wall, with the vertical studs 600 on centre and the horizontal studs 1200. A couple of weeks ago I started the preparation of the material we'll be using for our studs. They're 50mm wide with drainage channels for the horizontal battens. The first step in the manufacture of our battens was to cut drainage channels in the 150mm treated pine stock planking. We did this by making shallow 45-degree cuts across the planking in 100mm intervals. After making cuts all the way along the length of the plank, we turn the plank around and cut in the other direction. This creates a V-shaped notch for the draining of the condensation that'll collect inside the cavity of the rain screen. The next step is to turn the stock 150mm wide planking into 50mm battens. For efficiency, I'm clamping 2 planks together and making 2 50mm rips with my saw to create 3 battens out of each plank.
Can I tell you what's been on my mind? Sick and tired of the 9 to 5 in the city light. Hey, darling, we could get out of town, see the beautiful world around, wanna see it now.
The next step in the preparation of our battens is to sand and seal them. I'm sanding the edges to remove any sharp corners that might damage our insulation when we're installing it. The foil board is clad in a thin sheet of aluminium foil which can tear easily and compromise the membrane, so by sanding all the edges we should avoid this problem. For efficiency, I'm clamping 3 battens together to apply our sealant, starting with painting out the notches we cut earlier. This is where the condensation will be draining through on the horizontal battens, so I want to make sure it's sealed effectively so it doesn't absorb any moisture in the process. After liberally applying 2 coats of the lanolin timber sealer, I let them dry for a couple of days before installing them on the wall. I'll be attaching the vertical corner battens first. They'll be pre-assembled on the bench before I install them on the corner of our building. After getting a measurement, I select one of the straighter pieces of batten, cut it and double check it for fit before starting the process of assembling the corner unit. I'm using clamps to hold the 2 pieces together. This enables me to get a tight and accurate fit, while I pre-drill and install 8-gauge screws along the entire batten. I'm attaching the corner battens to the wall with 75mm long 14-gauge screws. The screw heads need to end up flush with the surface of the batten to avoid any problems later when we're adding the final cladding to the wall. To achieve this, I need to pre-drill the holes with 2 different sized drill bits. The first hole is pre-drilled with a large gauge drill bit to create a hole for the screw head, and then pre-drilled with a narrower gauge drill bit for the shaft of the screw. I'm adding screws in 400mm intervals to create a secure attachment to the frame underneath our insulation. The next batten I'm installing is a horizontal one that'll lie along the bottom of our wall. These horizontal battens have the drainage slots we prepared earlier. By temporarily setting it hard up against one of our installed corner pieces, I can get an accurate cut mark, trim it on the saw, and then return it in place for installation. I'm attaching it to the wall with 75mm 14-gauge screws like we did with our corner pieces. I'm drilling my pilot holes on a slight angle to make sure the screw catches the center of the bottom plate on the inside of the wall. I can then remove the 10mm packers that are creating a drainage gap for the bottom of the wall system. To install the batten that runs along the top of our wall, I use a clamp to hold it in place whilst I scribe my cut mark. Although it requires some extra work to scribe a long piece of material like this in place, it's worth it as I end up with a highly accurate cut point. I secure this piece the same way we did the bottom batten. You may have noticed this piece doesn't have any drainage slots in it. That's because being at the very top of the rain screen wall, it doesn't need drainage holes like the ones in the middle and the lower part of the wall do. With the 4 outside edges of our wall battened, we move on to filling out the middle of the wall with battens that match the inside of our wall frame. I start the process by adding marks on our foil board at 600 on center. I've cut my vertical battens slightly oversized to get a really tight fit. It also helps them stay in place before we add the fixings.
One way, gonna lay down, be still, won't waste another tear. Wait till it disappears.
Because the vertical battens align with the exposed roof rafters, I start the fixing process on the top of these battens and double check them with my level and then fix them off on the bottom.
Can I go to sleep, buried in my chair? The only thing that's left.
To fix these vertical battens to our wall, I'm using a 65mm 10-gauge stainless steel decking screw. By using a smaller gauge screw on these vertical battens, I've got less chance of running into a screw head when I'm installing the exterior cement sheet cladding. With our vertical battens secured to the wall, I start the process of installing the horizontal battens by running a string line across the wall. This helps me create accurate pencil marks to keep the horizontal battens aligned with the inside blocks of our timber framed wall. With this section complete, I move along the wall and start adding battens hard up against our window buff.
If you have love, you wanna give me some, and I will wait for someone else to come. Oh, it's sad, but it feels right. Are we just hallucinating now? This is the final, I just take a bow. While it all falls apart, there's a gift with them all going on. Oh no.
Join me in the next episode as we complete the battens for the rain screen walls, add a final piece of framing for our roof, then install the marine ply sheeting that makes up the ceiling in our studio.
Could you hike back to it, fight with it, sit with it?